Welcome back to Cassiotti News. I am your non-party affiliated host, Nick, and we are revolutionizing news with a platform of discussion, listening, understanding, and responding. If you can, help us grow by smashing that thumbs up button right now. Join the movement, hit that subscribe button, and if you want to participate, put your comment in the comment section below. Now, let's hear from our guests, Rocco and David. We'll start with Rocco on our second topic today. Rocco, President Trump was banned from Twitter, and Twitter suspensions have become more newsworthy with prominent figures being silenced recently. Last night, Mike Lindell from the MyPillow CEO and other prominent conservatives were banned from Twitter. Twitter's explanation for this activity is that they are purging disinformation and false election fraud that is running rampant on their platform. Is this the right approach, and how should government respond to it all?
So, the question of how government should respond is one that's been thrown around conservative and libertarian circles for, the last couple of years now. It's been a long time topic, and I'll get into that a little bit, but I think that first we should start by saying unequivocally, or at least I'll start by saying unequivocally, that it is both morally wrong and a confession of great weakness to ban people who think differently than you from participating in the conversation. If you have a good argument and you are really confident in your case, then you should want to expose that case to the most robust opposition possible. The only way to see if you really have a good argument is to do this. And when Twitter bans people like Mike Lindell and Donald Trump, and going back years, you can talk about people like Milo Yiannopoulos, people like Stefan Molyneux, people like Alex Jones, and you can have whatever opinions you want about these people, but when you ban them, you're implicitly admitting that you lack the trust of your users as a platform, which would allow you to effectively counter these points of view which you as a platform oppose. And that lack of trust, in my view, has been well earned at this point, given the absurd degree of double standards and blatant censorship which conservatives have had to endure. I can hardly think of a major grassroots conservative who has not been banned from a major platform at this point. And, if the arguments being made about voter fraud, about the cases of votes in Georgia, about Dominion voting machines, about the COVID lockdown, whatever the topic might be, if the arguments are so insane, it should make it that much easier to expose them as such. The more insane and divorced from reality a theory is, the easier it should be, and the more important it is to defeat it through logical debate. The approach of banning is a confession of weakness, and people on the left who truly believe in their arguments, they should be profoundly insulted that their ideological compatriots would stoop to such levels.
But I don't think that they're banning. I don't think that Twitter had banned Trump for ideological differences. I think that they banned Trump, and I'm sure both of you can correct me if I'm wrong, for inciting an insurrection. Inciting violence. I think that they banned him so that no violence would come out of his words or his actions. Is that wrong?
Well, this is ostensibly what they said, but the tweet that he put out there, which they claimed that was a tweet where he directly says that violence is unacceptable and that they should always be a peaceful movement. I believe actually the reason they took it down, the tweet that got him permanently banned was a video, was that he was saying that this election was a fraud like people had never seen before. And I think that was more what they had banned him over, though they did say it was about not inciting violence. So certainly that was the stated explanation. But, I think that the point is that...
Well, let me ask the question that probably all of the audience is wanting to hear from you. If somebody can say something that may incite violence, should they be taken off or should they be censored?
We should be very clear about what incitement is under the Constitution and what our Supreme Court has ruled. And there was actually a ruling on this where the first black justice, Thurgood Marshall, ruled 9-0 with all the other Supreme Court justices that a Ku Klux Klansman was not inciting violence when he advocated for the lynching of black people, that because he was not advocating for a specific crime in that specific moment, that he did not meet the standard for incitement. And it was the first black Supreme Court justice in the history of the Supreme Court who actually put this out. So when we talk about incitement, there's a very particular standard for this. And when you call the expression of an opinion, incitement, that is a very dangerous slippery slope. I mean, I could say, for example, that the idea that police are going around killing black people is a false conspiracy theory, and that to repeat it is an incitement to violence, and that you should be arrested for that if you say it. Now, I don't believe that, to be very, very clear. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe if somebody makes that argument, it's incumbent upon me to make the counter argument using the facts, data, philosophy that I have at my disposal. What I cannot do is say that their perfectly legitimate opinion is an expression of incitement to violence against police and use that as a pretext to ban them. And I think that people on the left need to remember where they came from a little bit in terms of in terms of the civil rights movement, in terms of the gay rights movement, in terms of these times in their past where they were on the side that was not so culturally accepted, and to understand that the value of free speech is so that views like that, if they are the correct views and the view of the majority of the populace, can win the day. And if we don't have an approach like that, then we will never truly know which views can win the day and who is or is not correct.
So 4 people had died from the Capitol protests. I live here in Orlando. I lived through the Pulse nightclub shooting. I had very dear friends that are still suffering heartbreak from that incident of domestic terrorism. Over 40 people had lost their lives then. And that was widely publicized, that was information shared on social media. This person, I have young kids myself, and this person was potentially thinking of doing this shooting at Disney, which would have been horrendous of that. So, do you think that social media platforms have a cross to bear in this, or is this mainly a government issue, Rocco?
Ronald Reagan said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but he said that when an individual actor does something horrific, we cannot blame society for the actions of that horrific individual. And the fact is that people can organize on social media, people can organize through telephones, they can organize through email, text messaging groups. There's all sorts of ways to organize in our modern society today, and we're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. So to blame social media companies for that, in my view, look, I'm willing to blame social media companies for quite a bit in our modern day, but to blame them for the violent actions of their users, I think is a slippery slope that goes too far, because ultimately it is the only argument I believe that can be sustained in that regard is that they were organizing on these platforms. But you're not going to be able to stop people from organizing in the modern day. There's too many ways to do it. There's too many avenues of it. You have, Tor browsers, encrypted browsing that's secretive, and you're just not going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle. So, no, I don't think it's obviously a tragedy that those people died at the Capitol. It's worth pointing out that 3 of those people were people who were actually going into the Capitol itself, and one of them was shot by an officer. One of them actually had a heart attack. One of them was climbing up that wall and died because they fell. So, I'm not trying to downplay or minimize it. I just want to put in context what happened there, and that this was a very unfortunate incident, but to use it as a pretext for taking away a free and open platform of debate, I think would be foolhardy.
So, David, let's get back to the main topic, and we'll get into some additional questions from there. So the main topic was that President Trump was banned from Twitter. Now we see Mike Lindell being banned from Twitter. Is this approach correct, and should government respond to any and all of it?
Let's be very clear. Okay, censorship and everything you're talking about, these First Amendment issues, it's 100% concerned with the government. All right, the government censoring speech, the government preventing people from exercising dissent. Right, this is a private actor, and for all of the talk that the right comes up with about private enterprise and letting the market decide, when the market decides that they should be eliminated, because their views are completely toxic to society and to the bottom line, to the profits these companies rely on to make, then suddenly the free market is not that wise, and they get very upset and start carrying around terms like cancel culture. When really what's happening now is they're just enforcing their terms of service in a more equitable way than they ever have before. most of these right-wing radicals should have never been afforded the kind of platform to spew the kind of hate and vicious lies that they have been. Right? There is no value in allowing people to spew lies as truth constantly with a free platform. Now, the only question is, how do we stop them? We don't want the government to decide what's true and what's false. That's what the First Amendment's about. Okay, so the government's not coming in here. These are private actors saying, you can't lie like that, right? And you can't incite violence like that. And the election was decided, okay? You're lying about what happened. If there was actual evidence, you would have brought it up in court. But no, like, for however many, cases were brought, that's what happened. So what we're really sitting around debating is the idea of there could be no freedom without responsibility, right? In order to have any sort of freedoms, you also have to act in a responsible manner. That's part of being a civil society that affords freedoms to all of its members, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people on the right have completely abandoned this principle, and they're acting in an incredibly dangerous and toxic way. And what it sounded like, based on the citation of what the Supreme Court hearing, is that Rocco is suggesting that Nazis or, it was Ku Klux Klan members should be allowed to encourage and incite the lynching of Black people as long as it's not a specific one, because that was the example he just brought out. And while I'm not sure if that's an actual Supreme Court case and holding, that is insane, right? We come from a history of white supremacy in this country, right? Black Americans have endured more terrorism than any white Americans have in any population throughout our entire history, right? And the idea that suddenly these people, these cowards, want to hide behind free speech when really all they're doing is trying to promote terrorism, it's like, no. Like, it's time for us to go ahead and finally end the Civil War, all right? One side will win, the other will lose. The one that wants an inclusive and acceptable society where everybody is free to actually be a member of it, if you want to be on that, then you go ahead and you don't try to undermine and incite an insurrection, undermine our free and fair elections and incite an insurrection when you just don't like the outcome of the election, just because you happen to lost, right? So the biggest snowflake in the world incited an insurrection because he didn't like the election results. These platforms all finally realized that he is now out of power. It's hurting their bottom line. They kicked him off, right? That's the free market at work, okay? And I am all for regulating the free market at certain times, but for me, let's talk about the smaller voices, the people who aren't massive celebrities or billionaires or My Pillow guy with all the money in the world that he needs to go ahead and have his voice heard in our society. Let's talk about the more marginalized people. Let's talk about the small organizers who are getting their voices crushed. Let's talk about Dakota Access Pipeline protesters who are not getting their voices heard. Let's talk about all of the bills that are going up in state governments right now, where they're trying to ratchet down on the right to protest. That is the topic we should be discussing right now, not whether some private platform is allowed to go ahead and enforce the terms of service that every single one of us agreed to get an account on it.
So the argument that's, again, popular on Twitter, just to pull more out of you, right? So we as the audience and non-party affiliated people just want more clarification. The argument that they'll bring back to you is the terms of service that the Democrats want to abide by was clearly not abided by a few years back when there was a bakery, a Christian bakery, that was refusing to sell cakes to LGBTQ members. It was very popular back then, and it's now one that's cited that in their religious terms of service, they don't want to service LGBTQ persons. They ended up having to service everybody against their religious terms of service. That's very popular among the right in this argument, counter argument, that shouldn't a baker be able to refuse service to anybody due to their terms of service, just like Twitter, or are they not connected?
You're talking about discrimination. We're talking about speech. Me saying that, you're from Florida, and so therefore I don't want to serve you. Okay, that might be something that you can't change. The idea, if you say though that, I think that the Democrats are running some sort of pedophilia ring and it's headquartered out of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., and somebody ought to do something about that. Okay, now we're talking about something that's patently false, very obvious, and like we're starting to get into the area of, is this incitement of potential violence? Like, okay. It does nothing for a discussion. So, for example, if I were to say right now, Rocco is a pedophile, he's on the convicted sex offender registry, and we shouldn't listen to anything he says. Now, that's completely false, okay? But if I go ahead and say that, then I've hijacked the entire discussion, and Rocco's now on the defensive, and that is completely corrosive to the idea of what free speech should be getting to, which
It's a very
should
clear example for the audience. I'm
ideas.
sure that they can connect with that. Thank you for that example, David. Finish your statement, and then we'll move to Rocco.
No. And that's really, for me, it's like that's what this is about. It's like Rocco is here in good faith, and I want to have these discussions about these topics in good faith. And if I were to suddenly try and hijack something and bring up something that's completely not true, then what I have done is this is the responsibility part that comes with freedoms. I have a responsibility to go ahead and participate in good faith so that we're actually talking about the issue at hand. But if I try to instead hijack and sabotage that debate by peppering it with lies, so that suddenly people listening don't know what we're really talking about or what they should believe, then I've completely eroded the entire purpose of this free and open debate.
Rocco, I'm going to give you the last minute, and we've got to move on.
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously a lot there, but I think what the real question comes down to is, he used a whole bunch of examples, which he called misstatements, which he called false, which he called lies. And, on the other side, there are a lot of statements which could be said that the Democrats made, which are, in fact, lies too. Things like Donald Trump colluded with the Russian government. Things like Brett Kavanaugh was a rapist. Things like Nick Sandmann confronted an Indian man and got in his face. Things like cops go around killing black people. There are all sorts of left-wing conspiracy theories, which are not fact-based, which are based in, frankly, the prejudices of the left, which are based in, frankly, the disinformation that is prevalent on the left. And the way to approach those topics is to confront them head on with those things. And it's like I was saying earlier, I find it such a confession of weakness to say that these arguments should be banned from the public sphere. I mean, just in what David was saying, he said that evidence was brought up in court of voter fraud and was dismissed, but it was dismissed on process claims. And Rand Paul made a great point of this on ABC with George Stephanopoulos the other day. And he left George Stephanopoulos speechless because he'd never heard these arguments, because left-wingers have spent so much time putting themselves in an ideological bubble, and they don't hear what the other side has to say. And when the other side has something to say, they chalk it up as conspiracy theories, and as a result, they put themselves in a place where they don't actually know what their opponent's arguments are. And, you end up with a situation where, to be clear, I never actually took a position on whether or not we should ban these platforms from doing what they're doing. My position is that Section 230 is something that is giving them a distinct advantage over their publishing competitors. When you are a platform, you are supposed to publish things from everybody regardless of their views. When you are a publisher, you get to pick and choose what you put on your website. By being a platform, Twitter, Facebook, all these websites are getting a massive liability protection from the federal government against libel lawsuits that publishers are not getting. This is a protection which makes their website much more interesting, much more interactive, and therefore much better for people to use. So I think that, the real point, just to sum it up, is that, we can say that each other's points are fake news, our lies are based in misinformation as a pretext to ban each other. But really, the last thing I want to focus on is when you said it's time to end the Civil War. When I hear that, what I end is, let's end it by us winning, you losing, half the country shutting up, you guys stop with your nonsense, and we will get on with what real fact-based people believe to be the truth. And you can't treat half the country that way. And frankly, it's a presumptuous and pompous manner to treat half the country. And the fact of the matter is, if we're going to talk about election fraud, 75% of the Republican Party believes that this election was stolen. And you can just go ahead and throw away 40% of the voting public, but you're going to end up with a dysfunctional society, and you're going to end up with a real civil war, and you're going to end up with something that doesn't function. And if we want a society that functions, then we should have these debates openly so that we can find out, are the claims that were made in Wisconsin, in Nevada, in Georgia, etc., are they truly without merit? Are they truly baseless? If they are, then, a 1 hour debate should expose that pretty easily. But people in high places aren't having those discussions because the entire narrative from the corporate press has been shut this up, don't give this any airtime, and then they wonder why almost half of the country feels completely disenfranchised.
There was a lot there, Rocco. David, I definitely want to give you a quick minute to respond, please.
Yeah, I don't need a whole minute. I think Rocco perfectly points out exactly how toxic and corrosive this idea that all speech is equal really is. Because we have 40%, well, not quite 40% of the voting public who apparently, based on his numbers, and I have no reason to think they're wrong, believe these lies about the election. I don't care what's on the media. Trump had all of the due process, more due process afforded to him than would be afforded to anybody in the world. And he was heard by judges that he appointed himself, right? And he had opportunities to try and present evidence, to try and make cases. And the bottom line is that he would have needed to overturn 3 different states to try and even get to a tie in the Electoral College and then ask the House of Representatives to hand him the election. He had no claims, no valid claims. They dismissed him on procedural grounds. He also lacked the evidence that he needed to go ahead and present. It was all lies. Now, it's lies because we had court cases. They gave him opportunities to present his claims. They gave him opportunities to present claims that then would allow him to bring evidence. And he had nothing. And he was heard. And so for him then to go and misrepresent what has happened, unfortunately then puts into the heads of so many Americans the idea that we don't really know what happened. And it's corrosive to our national identity. And so that is exactly what I mean, is we need to go ahead and stop this because we have such a toxic national discourse because people are not believing reality. Because
can I ask you a question to that then? Just an honest question, David. Do you think the Democrats, or at least you, would you be open to an investigation potentially, just like how Trump had an investigation over, I think it was 2 years of his presidency? Let's say the Republicans said, hey, we want to investigate, we want to count the votes, we want to match them up with signatures or whatever it is, just so that no fraud, if there ever was any, can ever happen again. I don't think the Democrats want fraud. The Republicans don't want fraud. And the general public definitely doesn't
want fraud. This is fraud. Saying that the election is questionable is a fraud of its own. So it's, for example, me saying, I really want an investigation into the accusations of pedophilia against you. Okay, now that is insane and completely toxic. All right, but now you're on the defensive. Now there's absolutely no basis for me to say that. But now it's all we will talk about. And if I say, well, people are saying, and I will not rest until we go ahead and have a complete investigation. And then we have an investigation. They, of course, find absolutely no basis for it. But then I say that investigation was just rigged. Really, we never got a real investigation. And I still want that investigation. That is what the right has done for decades now. That's exactly what they did against Hillary with Benghazi and everything else. Keep insisting that there's something fishy going on, and then eventually it just seeps into people's heads. This is how fascism grows, right? This is literally this is the Putin playbook, and a bunch of other fascist, or aspiring dictators. This is exactly how they attack their opposition, is by consistently attacking reality, so that people stop believing reality and start just investing 100% in what they're presented by the great leader. which is unfortunately, based on the 75% number we had before, what has happened with the Republican Party. And it's incredibly toxic and dangerous for democracy in this country.
We appreciate our guests coming on to the show. I hope it opened up everybody's mind. Type your thoughts to these in the comments below, and we will see you next time. Hit us up on social media, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next discussion. Take care, guys. Bye.